Welcome back, everyone. We are back to look at my ancient lost novel that has been found once again. And I've decided I'm just going to be doing recording videos for the moment because I don't think that streaming is going to be something that's particularly useful for this. First off, not a whole lot of people showing up for that kind of thing. And secondly, just that I was trying to... Sorry, my dog is shaking her collar. But I was trying to break the video down into, break the stream down, I should say, into videos, and it just was more of a hassle than it needed to be. So my goal going forward here, in addition to just looking at the various chapters of the story and trying to figure out what might be something that's worthwhile to try to save as an idea for later, and anything like that, my goal is to also use this to try to jumpstart my creativity and get myself into a headspace where I'm doing a little bit more writing, because honestly I've just been very lazy about that recently. So in service to that, my goal is to record one chapter, reading through and commentating about it a little bit, and then go and work on some other writing projects that I have currently in store. So for the moment, we're going to be looking at Chapter 5 of the tremendous trio, Trial by Fire, entitled 2 Down, 1 to Go. So, at the end of the last chapter, the group of friends, which, I've been calling them friends, but they literally met on the walking path a few minutes maybe before this whole thing started. So, man, they got to be friends very quickly. I guess being under duress does help with that. But the group of friends who managed to escape the guards who were trying to get them back to their cells, they were able to go wander around the facility for a little bit, but as they got to the exit, they found a whole bunch of guards, and a bunch of the guards found them. And so, at the end of the last chapter, they were trapped with nowhere to run, as I so aptly put it. So, in Chapter 5, 2 Down, 1 to Go, we begin with Richard saying, "Brace the door," yelled Richard frantically. "We have to make a stand right here." "3 against 30, we're toast, man," responded Michael. "I'm not about to go down without a fight," Richard said, grabbing a barrel of brooms and shoving it in front of the door. Jessica was moving with him, throwing everything she could to find in front of the door. A loud thudding came on the door, and it began to slide back against the weight of the barricade. Richard dropped to one knee and pointed the pistol at the left side of the door. He watched and waited as the crack grew larger, then pulled the trigger. The shot drew several surprised yells from outside, and the efforts to take the door stopped for a moment. The guards were being more cautious now. Suddenly, the door burst wide open, throwing the broom barrel into the wall, spilling its contents on the floor as it landed. Richard let off 2 more shots, but the guards had already retreated. Taking the moment, Richard threw the door closed and hid in the corner beside the door, watching for any movement. He kept the gun leveled at about waist height at the door. Again, the door flew inwards, and there was another burst of gunfire from outside now as well as inside. Neither side scored any hits, as both were ready for the other's attacks. "We could be here all day without anything being resolved," said Richard. "I wouldn't say that. They've got access to more powerful weapons. We have to settle for a pistol," Michael said. "And they have ammo." At the mention of ammo, Richard exchanged a clip in his gun for another one he held in his pocket. "I have 5 more clips." "Oh no, he said the wrong word." "It can last if we're careful." Richard resumed his position in front of the door. The attacks continued for nearly another hour. Yeah, I don't think you'd hold out in a broom closet with a pistol for an hour, but, that's just me. The attacks continued for nearly another hour, but no one was getting bored. Okay, now I'm just being cheeky. All stood at alert, listening, watching, waiting. Put that on Do Not Disturb. Finally, the guards pulled their biggest move. The door flew open again, and this time a gray canister rolled in. It began to let off a mist. "Gas!" Michael yelled. The 3 held their breath, but when they were forced to inhale, nothing happened. "Smoke screen, they'll be coming soon," Richard said. While he was saying this, the door flew open and several shots rang out. For the trio, everything hung in uncertainty. Suddenly, amidst the shots, a cry rang out. The shots stopped, and the sound of footsteps moving away from the door came to the 3. The door closed again, and they waited. The fog, once too dense to see your hand in front of your face, cleared in a surprisingly short time. Excuse me. When it did, Michael saw Richard kneeling in the corner, head downward looking at something he held in his hand. It was a dart. "Richard, were you hit?" Jessica asked, concerned. A cracking, rough voice came back. "Yes." Richard rushed and took the dart, looking it over. Then he looked at Richard and drew back in a startled gasp. "Richard, your eyes are..." Michael didn't finish. Richard turned his head towards them, showing his eyes. They were a deep, light brown. The first impression that Michael got when he saw them was that they looked like cat eyes. "What's wrong?" Richard asked. His voice was still harsh and raspy, but it didn't seem to notice. "They've changed," Jessica finished for Michael. "Changed? What do you mean?" Richard asked. "Exactly what we said," responded Michael. He moved warily back towards his friend. Which one?" "I think that dart..." Ooh, I did the double that's. "I think that dart may have contained some of their special experiment." He continued to close in toward Richard, who stopped short when he saw the hair. Almost invisible first, the hair on Richard's arm had begun to lengthen, then to change color until it was brown-yellow. As a like yellowish-brown, or maybe tawny. I could find a better word for that. Then some of the fur changed color again, becoming a deeper brown that stood out against the light hair everywhere else. The dark hair formed uneven spots all over Richard's arms. Spots, Michael thought. That looked strangely like those of a jaguar. Even as this happened, Richard resumed his defensive stance at the door. "Richard, I think you should let me take over," said Jessica. He looked back, once more fixing them with his strange eyes. "Why? I don't feel like I need relief." Jessica grabbed his arm and lifted it in front of his eyes. "Look at yourself," she yelled. He did. "Well," he said. "So what? It's my arm." Jessica dropped it and turned to Michael in complete frustration. "Why doesn't he see anything weird?" she cried out. "I think his mind is changing to accept his new form," Michael said. "Oh, great. That means that when the change is finished, he can kill us and save our captors the trouble." "Let's hope it doesn't go that far," said Michael, more to himself than in response to Jessica. They turned back to their now furry companion. He still seemed completely oblivious to the change, only twitching now and then as something else changed. I'm already using change too much here. That's a habit I still have today. I typically have to fix in editing. Already his crouch was becoming closer to the ground. The fur on his arms was thicker, and new fur, extending out of the neck of his sweater, was creeping up his neck towards his head. His ears were becoming rounded and seemed to Michael to be creeping up his friend's head. And once again... Suddenly, Richard let out a rough exhalation which sounded closer to an animal's growl than any human noise, and let his gun drop in front of him as he used his hands to support himself. It suddenly hit Michael that Richard's hands had changed, the fingers shortening and pulling back to form a jungle cat's paw. Richard gave a louder growl suddenly, and a set of sharp claws exited his new paws, and then pulled back into position as though they had always been there. Suddenly, however, the two noticed that it probably wasn't just the claws that elicited the growl. His sneaker suddenly burst open at the seams, the toes coming completely off and revealing the new hind paws that had torn through Richard's socks and shoes. Jessica gasped. "We have to do something," she said breathlessly. "What can we do other than wait?" asked Michael. And wait they did. They watched and waited as Richard's legs shortened, making it easier to walk as a quadruped. He had already shaken off the remains of his shoes and socks, and claws similar to the ones on his front paws had come in. Slowly, a tail crept out between his pants and his shirt, lashing about in agitation as it did. Jessica nearly fainted dead away. Richard's face, while they had been watching his legs in complete disbelief, had already nearly completed his change. His ears, now fully rounded and furred, had moved all the way to the top of his very feline head. The eyes were now part of the huge change that had come over his facial features. His nose and mouth had been pushed out, forming a short muzzle. His nose had flattened to the surface of the snout, and his mouth, as it hung open gasping for breath, were a much longer tongue and huge carnivorous teeth. The jungle cat that Richard had become suddenly looked around as though it had just stepped into the room, and then gave a low growl as it spotted the two humans across the room. The growl rose until it reached its ferocious climax, which made both of his companions jump. "Richard," Michael stammered, staring in disbelief. "Calm down, buddy. It's us." The huge feline didn't even seem to take notice. I psyched myself out. I was right. It began to circle them, mouth pulled back in a snarl as it did. "Now I'm wondering how big this broom closet is." "Follow me," whispered Michael. Jessica was too stunned to refuse. She followed him as he countered the cat's circle. As he reached the door, Michael yelled, "We surrender! We're coming out!" Jessica stared at him in dismay, but he was already opening the door. He stepped forward to let it open, then dove out as soon as it was wide enough. Not knowing what else to do, Jessica followed. As soon as she was out, Jessica felt someone pull her roughly to her feet. The man who had grabbed her led her quickly away from the door, at the same time removing the gun, belt, and pistol she had taken from the guard she had taken out before. That's a bit of a rough sentence. Michael was receiving similar treatment from another guard. Jessica looked back over her shoulder and saw 3 guards rush into the room. There was another loud roar from the room, followed by the sounds of a quick struggle. Soon, however, the guards led the jaguar from the room. It now wore a collar and seemed much less inclined to attack the humans that surrounded it. That was a little too easy. One of the guards quickly informed the scientists of the capture over the radio. Neighbor's dog is being loud. A response came back, but it was too quiet for Michael or Jessica to catch much. The guard motioned to the guards. Guards. I gotta find something else to call these guys. That held them, and okay, let me restart the sentence. The guard motioned to the guards that held them, and they started again back through the countless halls to whatever destination the scientists had in mind. We were so close, and now we're getting led even deeper into the place that we were trying to escape, Michael said, an edge of frustration to his voice. Of course, it's not like we had much choice. If it was this, kill Richard or get killed. It was this, kill Richard or get killed by him. He glanced toward the Jaguar. At least we have a chance to get him back as it is. What's that collar they put on him? Asked Jessica. Behavior regulation collar. It suppresses his aggressive tendencies, Michael responded. Yes, it's interesting that you should know that, one of the guards said. How do you know of it? Yeah, once again, rephrase. I make it a point to know my enemy and the tactics they use. That, and I've seen something like this before, Michael responded. They continued in silence for a few moments. Then, as they reached a four-way hallway junction, the leader of the procession stopped short. Take this one back to the holding cell, he said, motioning to Michael. She's coming with us, he continued, turning to Jessica. As he was led away, Michael called back to Jessica. Keep yourself safe. I'm going to need you later if we're going to have a chance of getting out of here. There was no indication if she heard him. The others left before she had a chance to respond. Michael's group soon arrived at the door to his cell. Right back where I started, he mumbled as one of the guards hit the button to open the large sliding door. And where you'll be staying until we need you again, a guard said back. As the door began to close again, Michael called back. See you next time I get loose. There were a few suppressed chuckles and a sarcastic, in your dreams, as the door slid shut. As soon as he was sure that the guards had gone, Michael chuckled to himself. I won't be sleeping for a while yet, he mumbled to himself, and with a quick flick of his wrist, opened the pocket knife that Richard had given to him. Didn't even think to look in my pockets when they disarmed me. What kind of two-bit operation is this? They're getting too cocky. Not that I care, it works in my best interests. This is definitely something, if I were to recover this story, as it were, I would change to a thought, because why would you be saying this out loud when you woke up in a cell with Richard previously, so there could be somebody else in the cell, not to mention the people who were outside the cell, and, we know there's a crack under the door of the cell, so there is a not insignificant chance that they could hear you saying this. So, yeah. He moved over to the door and felt over its left side. The metal wall once again met his touch. He grimaced slightly. The feeling had become a bit too familiar in the last few hours. Excuse me 1 second. Pushing the thought from his mind, he felt around again until he came to the approximate position that the switch had occupied on the other side of the door. Taking the knife in his left hand, he pointed at it at where he hoped the button was. With any luck, this thing should be long enough to connect the circuit. He stabbed the wall. The thin metal gave way under the attack, and to Michael's surprise and delight, the door jerked open. Well, first time. Looks like my luck is changing, he said to himself. Once again, beyond just the question of, would this actually be a thing that would likely happen? I mean, you do need to connect the circuit and most buttons to make them work, so, I mean, it's not a 0% chance, but definitely would have him wait before attempting this so that the guards have time to get out of the way. Also, just the fact that he's doing this without basically assuming there's going to be guards outside. Yeah, that should probably be on his mind. He looked out the open door and looked both ways. He leaned out the open door and looked both ways. I was about to accuse myself of reusing words again, but I just did that mentally. All the guards had already gone back to their patrols. He was alone for the moment, and once more wandering free through enemy territory. Only this time he was alone. Should be with no one to watch his back. He needed to find a way to distract his enemy's attention. That, and he needed someone to back him up. He couldn't help but feel that no measure of luck could get him through the hallways without detection. The hallways, of course. The solution hit him like a bolt of lightning. Well, if I can't escape detection in the halls, I'll just have to leave the halls. He walked over to a plain wooden door that broke the monotonous metal walls. If Richard saw me now, he'd kill me, Michael mused with a chuckle, even if he wasn't a jaguar. At this, Michael's thoughts changed to a more serious tone. He gripped the knob and turned it quietly. The room, however, had nothing of interest in it, nor any way to help him escape detection. So it was with several other doors until he came... Okay, let me try that again. So it was with several other doors until he finally came to a door that was already open a crack. Pushing it open further, he looked inside. It was lit by the same kind of bulbs that lit the halls. On one side, a computer stood, its screen showing readouts of some kind. Between him and the computer's console, a row of tables stood. On them, different mixtures sat in test tubes. Looking from side to side in the room, Michael couldn't see anyone. Strange, why would they leave the computer running, Michael thought. Clearly, he doesn't interact with people in general anymore. He stepped in and doing his best to stay low and out of sight. Yeah, there's supposed to be more to this sentence. And staying low and out of sight, comma, something. He stepped in, doing his best to stay low and out of sight. Suddenly, the readouts on the screen changed. Michael tensed and gripped the knife tightly in his hand. He slowly drew it out to full length. Slowly, he crept... I think I've used the word slowly like 3 times already in this paragraph. Slowly, he crept towards the end of the tables. He peeked around the end, used the word end again, and so he could see the computer's possessive controls. Stooped over the keyboard and looking up at the screen, a man stood. Curiously, he was wearing a guard's uniform. Now here, I think I'm giving away the game. I've slightly read forward here, just as I've been reading here in the video, and I already know that this is not a guard, but you should not know this at this point in the story, so the curiously should not be there. It should be that Michael sees this person and thinks that they are a guard. That makes more sense. What business does a guard have with the controls of the computer? And still, even in this case, if he's thinking that it shouldn't be on a computer, it could be a security console or something, so yeah. What business does a guard have with the controls of a computer? Michael asked himself. He ducked back under the cover of the tables. He could hear the keys of the keyboard click quickly, then the guard mumbled something to himself before typing a few more quick characters. I did slow and slowly the last one, now it's quick and quickly. Before typing a few more quick characters on the computer. Michael stayed in the same place for several minutes. After a while, his head began to droop. Before he realized what was happening, the knife fell from his hand, clattering noisily on the ground. Quickly recovering the knife, Michael turned towards the guard with the knife held as if to throw it. The guard had already reacted, though, and had his gun pointed at Michael. When Michael turned, however, the guard lowered the pistol. Michael Stone? Came the confused and startled voice of the guard. He removed the pair of sunglasses that he had been wearing, as though he thought they might have been cheating him. As he did, Michael's eyes widened in realization. Agent French? So they were going into an unexpected ally. I was right. So yes, Agent French ends up being the ally. Let me preface this by saying I'm going to start up the commentary section here. Chapter has a lot of events and a good number of things for me to critique and mention, even more than what I've already commented on here. But I had already kind of come to the conclusion that Agent French was going to be the unexpected ally that we saw when I was looking at the table of contents when I recorded the video for Chapter 1. And the reason for that was not because I had read forward at all or because I had remembered any particular scene with him in it. As a matter of fact, I was thinking that Michael or really just anybody in the group, somebody was going to run into him in a holding cell and probably already turned into an animal. That was my general guess as to what was going to happen. But the reason I thought that he was going to show back up again was not just the fact that he comes up in the conversation with the scientist in the main laboratory room, but also the fact that he was named in the early, I believe it was still in Chapter 1, the second half of Chapter 1, that he was named. I did not, in the beginning section, what I would probably call a prologue if I were to rewrite this and not just tie all the prelude information in with the rest of the narrative. The section with the government agent talking with the scientist and the scientist trying to convince him to get government funding for the operation. In that section, the scientist and the government agent aren't named. There's no names there. Versus in the FBI segment, you have a couple of the subjects that they're interviewing are named, but that's more just because they are, that's just a question you would probably ask somebody if you're interviewing them. But Agent French gets named in particular, and the narrative follows him, and this is something I even do today. I don't think it's a bad habit, but it's a habit that you have to be aware of if you are writing this kind of story where somebody who you meet earlier is going to show up later in the story. I think it has to be less obvious. You have to be a little bit careful with it. In this case, I may, again, just thinking if I'm trying to recover this story, if I'm trying to rewrite this story in a way that I would be comfortable publishing it in more than just a commentary, commentary series. if I were going to try to get it into a forum that I felt a little bit more comfortable publishing, chances are I would try to rewrite it somehow where you have either it is not as clear that Agent French is the point of view character in the FBI segment, or the FBI segment would be mentioned by Michael in the laboratory segment. I'd probably expand on that a little bit. But it would be a little bit less obvious that Agent French was going to become a character in the story. And if you're following along here, I know that there's not too many people that are actually watching these videos, and that's fine. This is more just an experiment than anything. But if you're watching this series, you can let me know if you thought that the return of Agent French was something that you saw coming. Because maybe it's just me being the author, being aware of my own tics, aware of my own tendencies, that I realized that Agent French was probably going to come back. So it might be interesting to see if anybody who's actually paying attention and watching these videos, if anybody else noticed these tendencies and saw that he was probably going to come back. Really, this was a shorter chapter than I thought it was. Once again, I have really long paragraphs here, so that's making things longer as far as reading is concerned. But I already mentioned briefly some of my issues here. First off, we have the fact that it's 3 against 30, and again, that's a little bit loose. We'll probably get to 30 at some point, but in the previous chapter, I mentioned 10. I believe that there were 5 additional guards. I'm not 100% sure if I'm right about that, if it was 5 of the 10 that spotted them, or 5 additional guards in addition to the 10, but one way or the other, we're still dealing with much fewer than 30. But still, you have a lot of people here, and we did establish in Chapter 3 or whatever, whichever one was the first one with the crew being in the lab, that the guards' assault rifles, their long guns, are not loaded, at least as a matter of course. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily that there are no loaded long guns in here. I would note that Agent French uses his pistol in the end of this chapter, so I think I was sticking with that idea that the long guns are for show and the pistols are actually what they're using here. But my big issue that I have with this is the fact that I go along to say that they last here for like an hour. I think it says either almost an hour or even more than an hour. Yeah, nearly another hour. Even with the guards being cautious, even with the crew being cautious here, I don't see that being likely. I would probably mention, because my personal author's saving throw for why I think that the three, the tremendous trio themselves, why I think that they're not taking this so seriously, they're not surrendering, is I think that their assumption is that the guards are trying to not kill them. Something I would probably bring up in dialogue at some point, or at least an aside thought. Because they are test subjects, because, once again, their rifles were unloaded. Pistols, I think, are just in last resort here, and so you have the trio. They assume that it's that the guards are not trying to kill them actively. They're trying to suppress them, trying to be able to do what they probably guess. They probably try to flush them out somehow, or tranquilize them, or something. Of course, we end up getting the transformation dart in here. But I still don't think they would take an hour. I think the guards would take a little bit, because they're trying not to get hit. And once again, the assumption that they're probably trying not to kill their prisoners either means that they're not going to be being as aggressive as they could be. And again, giving myself a little bit more time would be easier if I made that clear, this assumption that the guards are not trying to kill them. But still, I think it would be wise to shorten the time period here. You have the smoke screen, and they use the smoke screen there to probably get a better angle on the door, and get a shot there with the transformation dart. Now, something interesting, I'm going to scroll up here, because I believe in the end of Chapter 1, let me verify here. I think, let me see here. See here. um, what I was going to say, I'm trying to find it here if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So I had noted previously that in reading the first couple of chapters, I thought that I recalled the Tremendous Trio being transformed by injection. And then we have the discussion in the laboratory about the aerosolized form, and I don't think I would have known the term aerosolize at the time, but the aerosolized form of the formula being put into use. And so I kind of had assumed at that point, because we were talking about the aerosolized form, I actually was coming to the conclusion as I was reading the chapter where they're introduced to the scientists that they were going to be directly being transformed in that to test the aerosolized formula. But as I was going through a reading there with Richard turning into a jaguar, I was remembering this little exchange here where in the FBI debrief scene, you have this mentioned that the animals were foxes, jaguars, and horses for the injection. And I, having now reread this chapter with Richard getting hit with the dart and transforming into a jaguar, I recalled that my intention originally was that the experiments went the other direction. They went to the aerosolized version after these prototypes, these injected prototypes, where you just had these three options. So I believe my intention was that the three options that are mentioned here are the only three options if you get injected. Versus like the aerosolized form, the scientist mentions a tiger when he is talking to Richard. So they are working on other things. And I'm realizing more and more, the second book, I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but the second book is a title I recall, and I recall it pretty well. But it is the Tremendous Trio, A Crash Course in Self-Defense. That title reminds me that Michael is going to, I guess spoilers, that Michael makes it to the end of this story. But I guess that's not a huge surprise. But Michael is going to be trained by at least Jessica, because she's got, of course, her magical sub-1-year black belt in Kung Fu. But I believe also Richard, because he's the weightlifter and athlete and everything. But he's going to be trained and get his physical fitness up. But I don't recall like anything else from the story, so I'm curious to find out whether the gas form of the formula gets brought back up again, or if we see other changes there, or if my recollection that I'm mentioning right now of there only being three options if you're injected is accurate. Or it's entirely possible that I could be completely wrong about that. So it's interesting to see. We are to Chapter 6 here. I believe last time I recall it, we looked at something like 9 chapters total if we include the epilogue, because the epilogue is about chapter size. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8 plus 1. So about 9 chapters in this. So this is the end of Chapter 5, so getting a little bit past halfway here. I mentioned earlier that I think that this book is a little bit short. And I've kind of thought about that since then. And once again, trying to get good things out of a story that obviously is much older and reflective of a writing style and knowledge of writing that is much different than where I am currently. One thing I think I could use is I could improve, I should say, is the ability to write what I'd call like a novella-length story. And the reason I bring that up is because my first novel, my published novel, Heiress to the Shepherd's Estate, is 120,000 words long. And I love what I did with the book. There's a lot of scenes in there that just really felt like I did something really good. Some of my best character writing I've ever done is in there. And I think that though I could have improved my the lead in to the final conflict and the rising action climax and everything in that, I think I could have improved the how I led into that. I think that the actual action itself was done very well. But I think that effectively I basically had two books in my novel. Um, because, and this will make sense to anyone who's read the novel, and if you haven't, it is available on Amazon, Heiress to the Shepherd's Estate. But one thing, like the first, it's a little bit more than half. It's not too, it's probably maybe 3/5, 60% or something like that, of the book is the heiress, Flora, coming to this estate and this village of were creatures and shapeshifters and other magical creatures, and learning about them and kind of getting ingrained into the community. And it's a very down home, very kind of quiet sort of story. And then in the last part of the book, we get to the actual bread and butter of the what I would call the A plot. But I think there's something to be said that maybe just because I've been reading Lord of the Rings again here recently, but I could have done something like what Tolkien did in his Lord of the Rings novels, which is to have a single volume split into multiple books. Because I think that might be a helpful thing just for mentally for my writing. But overall, I think I'd like to also try to write a few more things that are simply. I don't know about 22,000. 22,000 still strikes me as a little short for this kind of story. So I'm going to say maybe between 30 and 50,000 words, I think, is about what you'd call a novella. And I'd like to be able to do that partially because I'd like to be able to turn out some more like paperback length writing, and maybe not necessarily publish it on Amazon, but publish it in various different places online and kind of get more feedback on that on my longer form writing. So we'll see. Maybe I'll come to the end of this book and I'll think that I've done everything that I wanted to do. But in the meantime, thanks for joining me. I think this went on a little bit longer because I had a lot of thoughts about the chapter after we read it. But I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.